What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of College Football Game Day Live, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I am your host, Thor Nystrom, joined as always by Mike Farrell, the godfather of recruiting of Mike Farrell Sports. Mike, how you doing today?
Good. Just promoting that we're live at this very second. And I just saw you did too. Very impressive.
Johnny on the spot this morning, Mike.
Yeah.
We have a whole lot to get to over the next 90 minutes. Mike and I are going to hit as many games as we humanly possibly can. Sides, totals, props, the whole gamut. So let's get started. Mike, the first game on the card for us today, kickoff at noon Eastern, Georgia at South Carolina. We have a spread right now live of Georgia minus 25.5 on the road with a total of 55.5. What are your thoughts on this game?
That's a big line. I think for any SEC game, laying 25.5 points on the road it seems excessive, but that's what the Oregon line was to me, excessive, 17.5. And
same.
I took Georgia because that line was fishy to me, and this line is too, but I'm not touching the line in this game. I like the under. I think Georgia wins this game. I think they score, maybe 38, and South Carolina limps to 10, and it comes in under 55. I see this as a domination, but not a run the score up type of domination. I think South Carolina will stay in this in the first half a little bit. It'll get out of hand in the third quarter, and then Georgia will start putting in some guys that'll keep this total under 55.
I think that's probably right. Yeah, and I'm on the under as well. That's where I would lean. Same as Mike. The spread, my number is right in line with what the Vegas line is. My spread on this game is Georgia minus 25. Spread's 25.5. A lot of that's going to come down to what happens at the in the second half when Georgia has the backups in and what Kirby Smart's prerogative is. I think, because you'd expect South Carolina to get, maybe to 10, 14 points. You'd assume you have that in the hand. But I will say one of the reasons I do lean under is because one of the terrible matchups of this game on the South Carolina side is their offensive line against Georgia's defensive front. South Carolina brought in all the interesting skill. They brought in Spencer Rattler. They brought in Stogner, brought in multiple impact transfer receivers as well. But they haven't fixed the lines on both sides. That's the problem for them. Having trench problems is not the issues that you want to have heading into a game against Georgia. So one of the things I'm afraid for is Spencer Rattler already likes to take things into his own hands when things break down. Things are going to be breaking down right after he receives the ball in this game. So I'm sort of concerned about that, although I'm interested to watch Spencer Rattler with all this heat in his face. I'm going to go under as well for all those reasons, though. Mike, another game at noon Eastern. Oklahoma at Nebraska. 1 week after Nebraska canned Scott Frost. We had all sorts of fun last week when he lost to Georgia Southern. We have a live line of the live line on this game right now is Oklahoma minus 11. That line has come way down since the opener. The Vegas opened that line at Oklahoma minus 16. They have gotten a whole lot of money, especially sharp money on Nebraska this past week. We have a total of this game of 65.5. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
You always, with an interim coach, the week after firing, you usually expect a team to come out with a little bit of a feeling of hope, confidence. They're going to play for their guy. Mickey Joseph isn't going to get this head coaching job, but the players want to play for him. And we've seen a couple coaches that have been hired, in that way. I mean, Marcus Freeman, obviously, as a players coach, and Mario Cristobal in Oregon as a players coach. So they're going to want to play for him. Casey Thompson has been putting up, good numbers. The running game has been okay, but they're still a 1-2 football team. They've still, they blew a game against Northwestern. They lost a game to Georgia Southern. Oklahoma, there's no real resume to go on here. They have not played anybody, and we really don't know what we have. Dylan Gabriel's looked good, but against who? The defenses look good, but against who? All that being said, I'm going with the talent in Norman. I know this is at home. I know laying 11 is a lot in Nebraska with that home crowd and the fans, but I still have a feeling that this Nebraska team sort of has a chip on its shoulder since Lincoln Riley left them. They want to show, Jeff Lebby wants to show that this offense is dynamic and can be dynamic. And I think the high that they get in the first quarter, maybe first half, is going to be deflated the first time something really goes wrong for Nebraska. So I've got Oklahoma, but it flies in the face of, my logic. Take the 11 with an interim coach at home, but I still think Oklahoma is going to win by 2 touchdowns.
Fair enough. I think on the side, I'm going to be leaning Nebraska in this one. Following the sharp money number 1 and the theory of the dead cat bounce with the team the week after they fired the coach. To your point, Mike, I do think we're going to see a better effort out of Nebraska. Not only that, they're not going to have a coach behind them that's shooting them in the foot at every turn with all the wonky in-game decisions that Frost made. He was selectively aggressive in spots that always turned out to be wrong. It was actually kind of impressive. You're like Ron Burgundy with Baxter by the fridge. You're like, I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
Right.
And now you don't have that anymore, where a coach is stealing all your momentum with these wonky decisions, the onside kick in the third quarter and all that different nonsense. So I think in game they're going to be better off too. But my favorite pick of this game, my favorite bet of this game, it's not the side, even though I would lean Nebraska for those reasons. I love the under of this game. The total earlier this week was crazy high. It was 67.5, and I think it had even ticked down from 68. It's down to 65.5 right now. So Vegas has clearly gotten money on the under. I think that's the correct source of action by the sharps. Not only is the Oklahoma offense down, not only is it hard to know what you're going to get from the Nebraska offense coming out with Joseph, and from what we've seen these past couple of weeks, this is one of the windiest games on the card today. Earlier this week, the forecasts were calling for winds around 20 miles an hour, a little over 20 miles an hour. I checked the forecast this morning. It's down a little bit from that, but they're still calling for 14-mile-per-hour winds in Lincoln while this game is being played. That's statistically significant for the under. My system already liked the under on this game, just in perfect conditions, set it at 62. And then you have the win factor as well. And you have the thing of both offenses being down. So I'm a proponent of the under. I also definitely lean Nebraska. I will probably have a parlay, Mike, as well, of the Nebraska money line and the under. So we'll do a couple of interesting things with that. Moving on to the
intriguing money line, man. It really is. I mean, it's just sitting out there for you, and tempting you at plus 350 because you just it's Nebraska. They could win this. They almost won it last year. That's an interesting money line, but I'm going the complete opposite, of course, and laying 11, and I just think they stink.
Yeah, plus 350 with the parlay with the under. You're looking at, I don't know, what would that be? Close to you'd probably be getting close to 5-1 or something like that. So that's what I'm looking at. The next one, highly intriguing game, especially for our producer Thomas. Purdue at undefeated Syracuse. Syracuse about to get a big challenge here from Purdue, but Syracuse gets this game at home. Another game where the line movement has been really interesting to watch. Earlier this week, when this thing opened, it was Purdue minus 1.5. Now you've seen the steady stream of money come in on Syracuse over the week. The line has crossed the threshold where now Syracuse is a 1.5 favorite live right now. We have a total of 60 on this game. What do you think about this one, Mike?
I hate everything about this game.
I
hate the line. I like the game, but I don't like the line. I don't like the fact that Purdue was favored by just a smidge, and now Syracuse is favored by a smidge. I don't really know if I believe in Syracuse still. I don't know if I believe in Purdue whatsoever. Louisville looked like a good win, and then they beat UCF, and then they lose to Florida State, and I'm like, that team I can't figure out. So how do I figure out Syracuse? Because I don't count the UConn victory because UConn's horrible. I just don't know what we have here. So I'm a pass on both, the over-under and the line itself. If I had to, I would take Syracuse because I think they're the more physical football team. And I think they're able to run the ball and control this game at home. But man, I'm passing on this one. It's just the line. If the line were like 3.5, I would take Purdue, or if Purdue was maybe laying 2.5 on the road, but this line is horrible. I hate it.
The line makes it difficult with where the line is. To me, there's not an edge. My line on this game is Syracuse minus 1.3. The live line is Syracuse minus 1.5. It's hard to find value on that. And Mike, to your point, my total on this game is 52.5. It's 60 live. So I am showing some value on the under, but it's hard for me to take that because of how much I know that Syracuse's offense has taken step forwards from last year. Last year, this was a team that could only run out of that shotgun spread that they did with Schrader and Tucker. This year, they bring in Robert Anae, Syracuse does, the former offensive coordinator for Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia. He's instituted that short sideline-to-sideline passing game, which it turns out is within Garrett Schrader's capacity to run.
Yeah.
Garrett Schrader's
he looks like a Heisman candidate.
Right?
I mean, 5 TDs. He's completing 80% of his passes. And this is another reason why I pass, because I don't believe in Garrett Schrader at all.
It's hard to based on his past work, but like Robert Anae is a real a miracle worker, right? Like, I mean, and it turns, it turns out, like I was wondering when Robert Anae came in, is this a square peg in a round hole situation? Because it's a guy who likes to throw, and now you're going to put him with a quarterback that is accuracy averse. But it turns out that Schrader, again, he can do the short stuff. Schrader also has some arm strength. That was the thing before. He's sort of analogous to I think of him like Brandon Peters, Nick Fitzgerald, some of Tommy Stevens. Those kind of like big strapping dual threat quarterbacks that had arm strength but had issues with accuracy. It was the same sort of thing, but being able to do the sideline to sideline stuff, it opened up so much because it first of all, it thins out the box. The defense now is disincentivized from stacking the box against you, which is what they were doing previously, right? Last season and stuff, trying to stop Tucker and Schrader from running. So you do that. You also set up the deep passing game, and then of course the running with the thinned out box. It's turned out to be a great fit for Syracuse so far. They proved the concept in the opener by slapping around Louisville. Of course, you mentioned that their last win was against a bad team, UConn. We won some money on that one. But this one, it is a very stiff test. But with where the money is, the sharp side is very clearly Syracuse in this game. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to take Syracuse with where the line is. But I do agree with Mike. Objectively, you can find better value in different games on the card because this line is very sharp. I'm basically following a personal conviction in backing Syracuse. We have one last.
Real quick,
go ahead, Mike.
The defense is very good for Syracuse. That's the good news. Garrett Williams is having an outstanding season already. 1 pick, a sack, 16 tackles. Guys, he's really improving his NFL stock. The problem, if Sean Tucker gets hurt in any capacity, this entire offense is down the toilet because he is more than 50% of the offense. He's their leading rusher. He's their leading receiver. Everything runs through Sean Tucker. If he rolls his ankle in the first quarter, Purdue's going to win this football game by 30. That's what scares the heck out of me.
Mike, one wild thing. I'm looking through some of the props. Some of them didn't get posted till late last night or even this morning. Some of the player props. One fascinating player prop from this game. I've had a lot of fun with the Iowa spread and I don't think we're talking about that game today, but Iowa's minus 23 against Nevada, and Iowa hasn't even scored close to 23 points this week. So I was wondering, when was the last time a team was favored by this much in week 3 or later than they had scored all season? We have another sort of fascinating one. Looking over the player prop lines for this game. Charlie Jones, who, as you know, transferred from Iowa and got very little looks there as a receiver. He was an awesome returner at Iowa, but they didn't throw the ball to him much. His over under for receiving yards in this game is 104.5. Iowa has not they've thrown for a little more than the 104.5, but not by much. That's about their per game average. Kind of crazy to look at that line, right?
And he is, he's one of the top 5 transfers so far in college football. He's already surpassed his entire season last year, this year in 2 games for Purdue. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's almost like he was freed from prison. And then he found new life at Purdue, and he's a new player. And yeah, I mean, that is dipped too. I mean, on DraftKings, it's over 97.5 for his receiving yards. And so far he hasn't been stopped. He's O'Connell's favorite target for sure. Yeah, they needed him badly too. I mean, because they lost everybody from their receiving corps. So he's been one of the better transfers in the country that no one's ever heard of. And it just makes you scratch your head a little bit about Iowa. It's like, okay, this guy can do this. Why didn't you let him do it when you had him?
1,000%. As an Iowa grad, it breaks my heart because the kid's really dangerous with the ball in his hands. You could see that over the past several years. Like I said, as a punt returner. But speaking of accuracy aversion, no one is less accurate than Spencer Petras in the whole country. So I mean, Charlie Jones just did not get those opportunities. You talk about a smart thing by Jeff Brom, a guy who over the past couple of years he lost Rondale Moore, loses David Bell. And then, Mike, as you know, coming out of last season, then you head into this offseason, one of the guys that you're counting on to be one of your top receivers, Milton Wright, he then runs into trouble at Purdue. Then he's off the team. So all of a sudden, Jeff Brom's looking around like, oh, boy, I need some receivers. Kirk Ferentz should have had this same thought at the same time, even though at the time he had Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy, who then Brom steals both those guys. He also stole Elijah Canyon, was going around and sort of in the portal doing some shopping. Totally remade that receiving core. Charlie Jones now is by far their number one receiver. They pepper that guy with usage. So he's stumbled out of the frying pan and now he's in nirvana. It's interesting because Charlie Jones has absolutely become an NFL prospect because of this. One of the big winners from the portal for sure. Mike, we got one last game at noon Eastern today that we want to talk about. Very interesting handicap on this one. Western Kentucky heading to Indiana. Indiana is a 6.5 point favorite live. We have a total on this game of 61 points in Bloomington today. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
And it goes against everything you would think in a Western Kentucky football game. I don't like the line. I mean, it's too close to a touchdown for me. I don't believe in Indiana as a football program. They beat Illinois, and that was sort of a hard-fought physical game, and they can play that type of football. And Western Kentucky is a throw it all the time and put up big numbers type of offense. So I like the under here, just simply because what I saw from Indiana against Illinois. Not that Illinois is a passing offense by any means, but they were able to control the running game a bit. They were also able to, keep everything in front of them. The defense has some players. They lost some last year. My dog drinking water back there. Could you drink louder? Is it possible to drink louder? Unbelievable. I mean, how's that possible? How can you drink that loud? And then, I just think Western Kentucky is going to, not run into any sort of buzzsaw here, but I think this is going to be kind of a sloppy game. And I don't think they're going to put up as many points as people expect. So I'm not touching the line. It's too close to a touchdown for me. That under, I think it's 60.5. I like Indiana to keep Western Kentucky under 30, and they're certainly not going to score 30 themselves.
Yeah, I think that's right. The total though, I'm staying away from that one. I do like a side in this one definitively. I really like Western Kentucky. The line right now, again, 6.5 for Indiana. My line on this game is Western Kentucky minus 4.2. So this is one of my biggest discrepancies of the entire week. I'm showing 10.7 points of line value on Western Kentucky. Of course, Western Kentucky lost Bailey Zappi and Jarrett Stearns, et cetera. Like, you have to mention that right off the top. And of course, their passing offense is down a bit. We've seen a bit of that. This team isn't quite as dangerous as last year, but you can't acknowledge all that without acknowledging how bad this Indiana team could be. Yeah, they escaped the game against Illinois, but Illinois had them dead to rights. Right, like if Bielema hadn't run those 3 or 4 straight fullback dives on, when he got it to first and goal with Chase Brown against Indiana from the 1 yard line, Illinois would have won. If Indiana hadn't gotten that drive with less than 2 minutes left and scored the touchdown with 30 seconds left, Illinois would have won. So they needed multiple things to happen to pull that game out at the very end. Then last week, Indiana is playing Idaho at home. Yeah. Idaho led 10-0 at halftime.
I know. That scares me.
Scary. Yeah. The Indiana secondary is I thought the Indiana secondary was going to be the strength of that defense because they had returned 3 starters in the secondary. And I think in their front 6 or front 7 that they only returned a couple. but the secondary has been the worst thing. They got gouged by Tommy DeVito, one of the best games he had in years and years. And then last week, the Idaho quarterback was averaging 9 yards per attempt. He had 3 touchdown passes. He was the reason that Idaho was being competitive in that game. So Western Kentucky, they don't need the Bailey Zappi. I mean, with the Bailey Zappi would throw for 600 yards against this Indiana secondary, but I don't think Western Kentucky needs Bailey Zappi to throw for way more than 300 yards in this game. Western Kentucky, their best thing is their receiving core and how deep they have the high end talent for sure, but how deep it is as well. They can do like the hockey line shift kind of a thing with that. I don't think Indiana has the bodies in the secondary, at least from what we have seen so far, to go across the formation with Western Kentucky. They're going to be able to find space. This could be a sneaky get-right game for Austin Reed, the D2 player of the year, who transferred into Western Kentucky. He's won his first 2 starts, granted, at Hawaii, and then last week I think they were home against Duquesne or an FCS team, someone like that. But they've won. And Reed has averaged 275 passing yards a game, but he hasn't looked quite up to what we thought he would be. And maybe it's unfair to him by comparing him to Bailey Zappi, the guy he took over for. But I do think this is a really, really good matchup for Western Kentucky. They are a live dog for sure in this game. I'm going to pick them outright to upset Indiana, but certainly with the 6.5 points, I'm absolutely going to take Western Kentucky.
Yeah, it's interesting, because they're also a team that struggled with Austin Peay, and they gave up points to Hawaii. So you have to assume the defense isn't that great. And in Indiana, you mentioned with the secondary problems, everything sort of flies in the face of that under. And this is why it's one of those games I think is going to be a clunker. I think Basilek's going to throw up a couple picks. I think, Austin Reed's going to struggle. I think it's just going to be an ugly game in Bloomington that is going to surprise a lot of people with the the low score, so it's going to be an interesting one to follow. I wouldn't touch the line, but I'm going to go under, and you're obviously going to go Western Kentucky. You just love D2 transfers because
love it.
You just love Division II football, and those guys that West Florida national champs in Division II, so you're riding that high. But I just think this game might be over his head. I mean, he didn't look great against Austin Peay in Hawaii, and they're just god-awful football programs.
We'll see how he does against Indiana. But, yeah, I mean, to your point, I don't trust Indiana's offense as far as I can throw it, right? Like, Connor Bazelak, Missouri didn't care that they lost Connor Bazelak. They wanted to give the job to Brady Cook. It was the same thing like Baylor with Jerry Bohannon. They were like, yeah, you can go. Like, thanks for what you did last year, but we're going to go with the kid. And so that's who Indiana's starting quarterback is now. Their starting running back was a guy that couldn't get on the field at Auburn and probably shouldn't be a bell cow.
Well, he's a gadget guy. He's 5'6".
We're talking about Sean. Is it Shivers?
Shivers. Yeah, fast as can be.
Call him Shivers. Yeah,
but it's fast as can be. But man, I mean, he's so small and tiny, and he should not be a bell cow at all.
He's a poor man's Devin Achain or a homeless man's Devin Achain, right? Like something like that. Shouldn't be a bell cow. They have to make
4 inches shorter. I mean, this is one of the shortest.
Devin Achain is a giant next to.
You're never gonna see a shorter kid. And that's great. Like it's hard to hit. But Deuce Vaughn looks like 6'5" next to Shivers.
Yeah, and Indiana's lost all the skill talent as well. And the receiving core. They used to have the 3 NFL receivers going across, like with Westbrook and Fogel and Wap Filior. Shout out to Wap Filior. And then they had Peyton Hendershot at tight end. So you had like 4 quasi NFL guys there, but they've lost all those guys. It's been hollowed out there. So to Mike's point, don't trust those offenses. I might lean that under as well, because I mean, Western Kentucky is going to be able to control the ball with that short passing game. If nothing else, we don't know how explosive they can be. That's going to depend on how Reed's downfield accuracy, but they should be able to control the ball with that short passing game, which maybe will have the effect of being like really effective running. In terms of that, guys, college football has returned in all of its glory. Betting pros and DraftKings Sportsbook are teaming up to bring you a wild offer to start this football season. New customers can get $200 in free bets instantly when placing a qualifying bet of $5 or more on any college football game. To get in on the action, just create your new DraftKings Sportsbook account using the promo code CFBPros. Make a minimum deposit of $5 or more and then place a bet of $5 or more on any college football game to claim your $200 in free bets. Again, to claim this offer, enter promo code CFBPros at sign-in to get started. Bet now before it's too late, as this offer ends on September 19th, which is in just a couple days. So you better take advantage of it today, betting college football. We have plenty more games to talk about. Mike, moving to 2:30 Eastern kickoff. Another very interesting game with a coach who just started his tenure, but he's already in hot water. In Marcus Freeman, we have Cal headed to South Bend to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame live right now is -12 in a game. We'll talk about this, but it's had some very interesting line movement this week. The total on this game live is 41. Mike, what are your thoughts on Notre Dame and Cal?
Yeah, I mean, this is okay. So you've got a defensive team in Cal and a backup quarterback in a team that looked horrible on offense last year. So
Mike's talking about Tyler Buckner's down.
Drew Pine Tyler Buckner's out for the year. Drew Pine, I don't believe in. He's a Connecticut kid. He's okay, but he's going to make.
Oh, you don't like Drew Pine?
He's all right. I mean, he's okay. He was a little bit overrated coming out of high school. You know, he's not a big kid. Doesn't have a cannon arm. He was one of those kids that sort of propped up in 8th grade. In 9th grade as a big-time quarterback, and then everybody just believed it. Jake Heaps, remember him?
I did. He went to Kansas for a
that's
hot minute.
That's who Drew Pine is he's Jake Heaps. So, they're the same football player, and I just think, propped up and got a few big offers early, and everybody just believed the hype. I don't really think he's going to be able to make a difference in this offense. They don't seem to have any playmakers. I just don't see.
Except for Mayer. You have to give
Except for Mayer. Yeah, he's a monster, obviously, but you can't feed him, constantly. And,
they're going to try.
Styles they've got guys that I think are maybe a little bit faster than they look or have been played, but this is a football team that's playing very slow. They don't use their speed like Tyree or Styles or anybody like that. They don't have a consistent running game. Now, all of this being said, I'm not touching the line, but I like the under because, Wilcox is a good game plan guy. Defensively, they're a solid football team. They're not great. Notre Dame is not a great offensive team, and I think you're going to see sort of a sluggish, low-scoring game in South Bend.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying about the line movement, this one was really interesting. When it opened, the first line I had seen was Notre Dame -12 on Sunday. And it sort of immediately by the next day when the announcement came out about Buckner, or on Monday, I think that's when the announcement came out about Buckner, but the line dropped all the way down to Notre Dame -9.5 for like a hot minute, which was a crazy overreaction. Like this Cal team, they've only beaten an FCS team, and then last week they beat UNLV, who's been one of the 5 worst FBS teams over the last decade. Beat them by 6 points. Yep. Barely. This seems just like it doesn't seem like Cal has taken any step forward. It's in line with every other Justin Wilcox team that we've seen there. Their defense is pretty solid. I happen to look it up. SP Plus, they're 24th right now. But their offense, just like it's been in recent years, is ranked in the hundreds somewhere in terms of all the efficiency numbers, stuff like that. It's the same thing. He's trying to make Wisconsin of the West Coast or whatever. They could beat bad teams and control bad teams, but when the talent discrepancy gets as such, they just can't overcome it. And that's sort of what I see coming here. I also think Notre Dame's going to have a better performance. Mike's mentioning that he doesn't love Drew Pine. Fair enough. Like the ceiling of the offense certainly goes down going from Buckner to him, but I actually think the floor goes up a little bit. My one issue, having watched the first 2 Notre Dame games with Buckner, was he was trying to put on the hero cape too much. There was too much of the offensive usage being tunneled into Buckner, whether it was the throws or whether it was just Buckner running around. I don't want that, especially when Buckner, his career TDI ratio, it's like 3-6 at this point. He was taking too many chances, making too many mistakes. So to Mike's point about spreading the ball out more, or getting it into the hands of guys, Pine, he's smaller than Buckner. He doesn't have the arm strength of Buckner, and he's not as athletic as Buckner. But what I think he does better is just shuttle the ball off short and intermediate. I think that is where they're getting an upgrade. Well, that's all they really need to be better on offense. I mean, that is what they have struggled with so far. Just get the ball to Michael Mayer, right? Like, and when teams start double and triple teaming Michael Mayer to take that away, hit your other guys. So like, I don't want to say it's an upgrade because I don't think that Pine is better than Buckner, but Buckner was not helping the offense to this point. Did not play great in the first two games. It's one of the reasons they couldn't overcome Ohio State, even though the defense had a really good performance in that game. And it's one of the reasons that they lost to Marshall. So I think that's something that's really interesting to keep an eye on. And I think the market was sort of acknowledging this. Like I'd sort of said, the money came in early on Cal. And then, for just a brief minute, it was down to 9.5. And then the number is shot back all the way to 12 now. It's marched 2.5 points the other way these past couple of days. We'll see leading up to kickoff. We still have several hours until this one kicks off. If this one ends up toggling even higher. But, I mean, if you like Notre Dame in this one, I would suggest betting it sooner rather than later so that the line doesn't get to 13 because that's the direction it's moving. I certainly like Notre Dame as the side. My adjusted line on this game is 17.5, and that's even baking in a little bit of a penalty for Buckner being out. I just think Notre Dame is the better team in a vacuum for sure. You're going to get the effort from them. And like I said about the quarterback situation, I probably didn't dig Notre Dame as much as maybe some other people out there because for those reasons. To Mike's point about the total, it's live right now, 41. My adjusted total on this game is 43.5. So I would not argue against an undercall. That would be where I would lean on this game as well. The prop market is up for this one. Mike, let me get your take on a couple of these. Michael Mayer is 58.5 on the receiving or on the receiving yards that I see. Drew Pine is 204.5. Jack Plummer is 216.5. Do you have any thoughts on those? And do you just think that they're going to give all the usage to Mayer? It seems like that could be a juicy one.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, you would think that was going to happen last week too. And honestly, Mayer's got 13 catches, but he's only got 135 yards. He's got one touchdown. It's just odd. Like he's a guy. He's Gronk. He can get downfield, but they're utilizing him as a catch and run type of guy when he should just be boxing guys out downfield. You would expect the targets to be there and for him to go over that 50-plus yard mark. And you have to assume a new quarterback's going to rely on his massive tight end. All these assumptions are there. It's just very, very odd to me that, Mayer is unstoppable and they've allowed him to be stopped. So, I like the under on everything. I like the under on Drew Pine's passing yards and Plummer's passing yards because I think this is going to be, a low-scoring kind of ugly 3-and-out affair. But Mayer is intriguing. I would take the over on that yardage. I wish, last week I took Tillman was the week before at Tennessee because I trusted the quarterback. I don't trust Drew Pine to get Michael Mayer the ball enough where I'm going to say go all in on that over.
I just placed a bet on the over on Michael Mayer while you were talking. I hadn't seen that line, but before that, the 58.5, just to give people some context, going back to the last 6 games. So it's the first 2 of this year, the last 4 of last year. Michael Mayer has been 72 receiving yards or more in 5 of those 6 games. The only one where he wasn't, it was that Ohio State game in the opener where you had the bad quarterback play. That game, Mayer had 5 catches for 32 yards. That was the one game where he went under, but he was still getting the targets. Going to last year, I mean, like he was over this total here in a lot of these ones. I mean, way more than half of the season. And like I said, 5 of the last 6. He's going to get the targets one way or the other. I think he's probably even going to get more targets, or at least more on target targets, or the accuracy ones, the adjusted accuracy ones, where they're ones that he can catch with Drew Pine. Moving to the next game on the slate. Now we are at 3 p.m. Eastern kicks. Another interesting one, Mike. The Tulane Mean Green heading to Manhattan to play Kansas State. This line is held steady at Kansas State minus 14. There's been money from the Sharps in on Tulane that had toggled the line down from, I believe it was when it opened, it was like Kansas State minus 16.5. It like I said, it's holding steady at 14, at least for now. But I'm going to be interested to see if this one toggles at 13.5. We have a total on this game of 49.5. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
Yeah, 2 touchdowns I don't like. I mean, they're coming off essentially a rivalry game, a big blowout of Missouri. There's going to be a letdown here on the road. So I would take Tulane if you can get that 14. If it does dip below 14, then maybe pass. If you get 14.5, even better. But if it stays at that 2 touchdowns, listen, I like Kansas State. I think they're a good football team. They're better than Tulane. Deuce Vaughn is dynamic. They haven't even started to use him in the passing game yet. Martinez can run better than he can pass, but he's solid. The offensive line's strong. They should win this game, but I've got the letdown factor here that they're going to overlook Tulane. Guess who they got next week? Oklahoma. This is an absolute 100% trap, struggle 7-point victory for Kansas State. So take Tulane.
I love how you set that up, Mike. Very well said. This is a really bad situational spot for Kansas State. That's the first thing, and it has to be acknowledged. People out there, they'll be like, "Oh, it's Missouri, so whatever." You drop kick Missouri, but like Mike said, they're one of the primary rivals for Kansas State. Both those schools' primary rivals is Kansas, but outside of that, it's each other. You have that big win, and for Kansas State, that was a big win. They controlled that entire game and dominated that Missouri offense. Missouri couldn't do anything on them, and Missouri helped facilitate how wide that score got with their quarterback play. They threw 3 interceptions in 31 attempts. So Missouri was really, really struggling to get out of their own way. And then for Kansas State now, looking at next week, you have the huge game as well. So it's the letdown look ahead sandwich type spot. And I think this is a really sneaky spot for Tulane heading in, a spot where you could potentially ambush a program in Kansas State that is used to being the hunter, where they are the ones that are ambushing these heavy favorites. Tulane comes in a little bit under the radar. They've smacked around 2 bad teams.
Very bad teams.
Yeah, there was the FCS one, and then they played UMass, who's basically an FCS team.
Right.
Tulane won those 2 games, 94-10 combined score. But nobody's seen them yet. But Tulane returned almost everybody on both offense, Michael Pratt, Tyjae Spears, most of the receiving core, most of the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also on the defense, I think they returned 18 total starters. They were near the top of the nation in terms of returning experience and returning production, everything like that. They liked what they did with the coaching staff. That Chip Long, their previous offensive coordinator, was not a good fit there. Wasn't loved by the players. Willie Fritz did not like his play calling. They push him out. Willie Fritz has got a guy now that he likes. The offensive play calling seems to be back. Michael Pratt last year, when his game was down, people got to remember, he was struggling with injuries all year. Head injuries. He had a bad shoulder problem that he tried to play through. Tough kid, but he was compromised last year. Now he's healthy. He's playing way better. But again, this is their first test. But because of that, you're getting a ton of line value, I think, on Tulane. My line on this game is Kansas State minus 7.2. I'm showing almost a touchdown line value on Tulane. A part of that is just in a vacuum, and a part of that is the money that has come in on Tulane. It's not as big a discrepancy as in some of these other ones, but Kansas State is where you're seeing the tickets bought in the market. Tulane is where you're seeing the money coming in the market. So it's going to be interesting to see if the sharps can offset the public enough on this one to get this down to 13.5. Then maybe, people that like Kansas State more than me, maybe you would think that that'd be an opportunity, but I'm heavy on Tulane in this game. I even think that they're a live dog. If Kansas State comes in and they're a little bit flat, or they're looking ahead to next week, they could get ambushed in this one. Kansas, you love Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn's awesome. I'm not going to argue that. Second coming of Darren Sproles might not be quite that good, but he's in the same phylum. Mike mentioned the receiving utility. Deuce Vaughn's one of those smaller running backs that can handle enormous usage, both as a running back and as a receiver, so you can funnel targets to him. The problem with the Kansas State offense is I still think it's one-dimensional. You have the scrambling ability of Adrian Martinez in addition to the Vaughn running stuff, But Adrian Martinez still can't get the ball down the field. It's one of the problems, when he was at Nebraska. So Kansas State is going to have problems pushing teams downfield, all season. Also, Kansas State is a little bit thin in their receiving core in terms of talent. It's not a very good P5 receiving core. So you don't have as much talent there as some other folks. For all those reasons, I do think Tulane is a sneaky play on this one. I like Tulane. Their defense was playing way better at the end of last season than it was at the beginning of last season. And we've seen it play pretty well so far, even though they played two crappy teams. So I'm going to be on Tulane in that one. With Mike, we're both on that
there.
one.
They're wearing their baby blue helmets too.
Tulane. Oh, I love with what is it? The seagull skiing or whatever that one.
This was with the wave, but this is the baby blue with the wave. Arguably the prettiest, most gorgeous helmet in all of college football. So take that. That's going to give them at least 7 points. I mean,
I like that one,
and not be really good at football. It's just tune into that game for just 1 second to watch the helmets. They're UNC has the best baby blue, but these are the best helmet with baby blue, and you can't bet against baby blue in a trap game.
No, that's Mike. That's on the 20 commandments of Mike.
That's Farrell. One of my 20 commandments. Yes.
Yeah. Or it's going to be 100 by the end of the season.
Literally 100,
sure. Yeah. This might be an alternate uniform game because I'm pretty sure I saw on Twitter that Kansas State was doing. They have they're doing the helmet with what's he called, Willie the Wildcat or whatever, and it's like some sort of like throwback with a white jerseys or something. It is cool.
It's very cool.
Love to see it.
But this is the other thing. This is rule, number 80,000. Don't wear your cool helmets in a trap game ever. Don't debut these. There's a sense of cockiness to it. I'm telling you, their helmets look awesome. You got the number on one side. They got the retro Willie on the other side. They're going to look clean as can be, but that's going to just motivate. I'm telling you, it's like remember the green uniforms Notre Dame used to wear?
Yep. Every
time they wore them, they were like a 2-touchdown favorite, and they struggled or lost, and then they learned that lesson. So Kansas State, be careful. You should probably just go out there. Your boring, silver helmets. You try to get too fancy, the baby blue is going to knock you silly. So the money line on this one kind of, intrigues me as well. Hold on, I just had it. Because, as you mentioned, this is a bit of a trap, and it could be plus 450 for Tulane is not shabby if you really feel like gambling your life away and being a degenerate. Throwing $10 on that is not bad.
That's really good. Yeah, on what I'm seeing, plus 460. I'm all in. I'm looking them against Western Kentucky, a 2-leg underdog money parlay. I can't even talk. Parlay. We would get a payout on that of looks like let's see, 17, a little bit more than 17-1. Just those two. That's kind of juicy. I might be placing that one a little bit later on. We'll see about that. Okay, moving to the next game on the slate. Now we're moving to the traditional 3:30 Eastern time slot, and we got several games in this time slot to talk about, Mike. First one, BYU, who has a little bit of a decimated receiving core, but outside of that has looked really good. Without their top two receivers, they beat Baylor last week, held on in overtime. Unfortunately, I couldn't hang on long enough to watch the end of the game. That was one where I was like passing out, like as it was, late fourth quarter or whatever. Sometimes that happens when you wake up early and watch college football all day. You can't make it to the very end of the Hawaii game, but BYU heading into Oregon, into Eugene. Oregon live right now is a 3.5-point favorite. We have a total on this game live of 58. Who do you like in this one, Mike?
Yeah, I like BYU. I'm a believer. I had Baylor winning that game last week, and they didn't get it done.
Close.
I think, what I like to do is I like to come up with, potential narratives for the college football national media. And the narrative out of this one is not, BYU is a top 10 team or blah, blah, blah. It's going to be Dan Lanning's over his head. And I could read the headlines now because this is a tough BYU team. I think Puka Nacua is going to be back. These game time decisions from what I hear. But that's going to help. But the way this team plays, I mean, up front, they're very physical. You know, Jalen Hall's very difficult to defend. Defensively, they're sound and technical. You've got Bo Nix, gonna Bo Nix. You know, he's gonna do his thing. I like BYU in this one to cover and you know, obviously win outright on the road.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I was looking up. Apparently, Pete Thamel on College Game Day, probably while we were recording, went on there and updated the statuses of Romney and Nakua. Thamel said that Romney's going to be out again, so this will be the third straight week that Gunnar Romney has not been available for Jaren Hall and BYU. Puka Nakua, Mike said this just a bit ago, is going to be a game time decision. So that's the one where they're not addressing it yet. Nakua, that's a big deal. If you're interested in betting this game either way, check in on his status. They give him a ton of usage. In particular, early on in that first game, you saw when they did not have Romney, they were forcing the ball to Nakua a bunch. That was the game where he got injured against South Florida. They gave him 3 jet sweeps in the first quarter. The first one was a long touchdown run. The second one was a short touchdown run. The third one was where USF was not fooled anymore, and they ganged up on him, and Nakua got injured in that one. But if Nakua can come back for this game, he's not only going to get peppered with the gadget plays again, he's also going to get peppered with the receiving target usage. That's a big deal. Without those two guys, if Nakua doesn't play, heading into Eugene, it's going to be a lot easier for Dan Lanning to be able to defend them. So we'll see how that one plays out. I definitely lean towards BYU in this game. If I knew that I had Nakua, I would be betting BYU. The reason I haven't bet this game yet is I was waiting on the statuses of those guys. I wanted one of them to play to be able to justify the BYU pick. Of course, they didn't need them last week, but you had that big win over Baylor, which for BYU, it was a big deal. Baylor had beaten them the year before. BYU didn't love that. So getting one over on them on the back end, you pull it out in overtime. Hard-fought game without your receivers again. And now you got to turn around the next week, head up to Eugene. Oregon, I mean, we got questions about them, of course, after watching Georgia just slap them around all day. But Oregon still has the talent. They have very high-end talent. And this is a motivated team as well, you know, talking about it from that side. So you think that, you know, Oregon's going to come out. You're going to get Oregon's best shot. But, yeah, I mean, I'm with Mike in that I have some questions about early season Oregon after I watched the last one. I'm not going to say Dan Lanning's over his head, but the strategy that they brought into the Georgia game was not conducive to winning with Bo Nix on the road against a Georgia team. So we'll see what they have in store for BYU, but would definitely check on those receivers.
And how about this for a deep dive? Ready? Okay, so
let's hear it.
Puka Nakua, who I love as a player, is transfer from Washington. He only had 7 catches in his freshman year at Washington in 2019. 3 of those for 43 yards and a touchdown were against Oregon. That's deep dive. He knows Oregon. He's familiar with them as a former Pac-12 player. You know, their game got canceled in 2020, but he's done a ton of film work on Oregon. Now it's a new Oregon defense with Dan Lanning. It's a new Oregon team and all that stuff. But I will tell you that this kid's going to get up for this game a little bit more. I guarantee you he plays. I guarantee you he plays. You know, game time decision, he's playing, and he's going to make the difference in this football game, I believe.
Okay, you heard it from Mike Farrell. So we're both on BYU in this game. I'll be even more confident if Nakua does play, but you've gotten the Mike Farrell guarantee on that now. Moving on to the next one. Same time slot, 3:30 Eastern. We got an interesting one. 2 blue blood Power 5 programs tussling today. Penn State heading to the Plains, playing Auburn on the road. Live line on this game. It's come down to Auburn by 2.5. It was Auburn by 3 for most of the week. I'm sorry. I got the flip the other way. Penn State 2.5. Come down a little bit from the 3 number. The total on this game live right now is 44.5. It's toggled down to as of this morning. What are your thoughts on this one, Mike?
Yeah, I like the under here. I think this is going to be a sloppy football game as well. And I think it's going to be a lot of run. You know, there's going to be a lot of power football here. Neither team, I think, trust their quarterback to, you know, they don't want him to make mistakes. They're going to play conservative. James Franklin, Sean Clifford's the new Sean Clifford, you know, with the comeback against Purdue. No, Drew Allar is a very, very fantastically intriguing, massive quarterback with tons of arm talent who's, just flashed in last week's game. He's going to be the starter by midseason because I feel that Sean Clifford is going to do Sean Clifford type of things. On the road, SEC, I mean, this is a really, really crazy atmosphere. They're used to that at home. They're used to that at Ohio State and Wisconsin and some other places. But this is their first foray into, SEC football territory. And I think this can be a lot of run. I think you're going to see a lot of run on both sides. So I've got the under at 48. Both quarterback situations aren't pleasing to the eye. And I think, Penn State being favored on the road, I mean, I would take the home dog here if I had to. I would probably bet Auburn to cover or 2.5's a win. But I like the under here better than that.
Yeah, my initial lean was to Penn State because I don't like this Auburn team. Of course, Brian Hartman is on thin ice. He's going to be on thin ice until he's there, as long as he's there, I think. And then Auburn has not been. They've looked basically the same as they did last year, right? Like they were having a hard time putting away San Jose State. It's the same paint drying offense that we've seen there. Give the ball to Bigsby. Everyone in the stadium knows the plays that are coming. Penn State would seem to be, they're certainly going to be tougher than the challenges that Auburn's seen so far. I think I tend to think that Penn State will have enough to overcome Auburn, but I do think that Mike is probably right in that the play is under. Both these teams are going to want to run. Penn State now because they feel that they potentially can, where in the past, especially last season, they just would abandon the run game for long stretches, like whole games, because they didn't trust the running back room. First of all, they definitely didn't trust their offensive line. And so they would just have Clifford funnel the usage into Jahan Dotson last year. This year, they feel that the offensive line is a bit better. And then you bring in Singleton, right? So like they feel they also have better running back talent in addition to having a better offensive line. You're going to see running on both sides for that reason. Auburn, I don't think trust their starting quarterback, Finley. And last week, to my point about Singleton, that last week was the breakout game for him. He had 10 carries for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns against Ohio. He also had 2 kick returns for 40 yards. He's been kick returning since the opener. One interesting thing, Mike, in lieu of that, Nick Singleton, his over-under rushing yards right now. You ready for this? After what he did last week, it's only 48.5 live. I realize that Auburn has a much better run defense than Ohio for sure, but we also know that Penn State is going to give them the ball a whole bunch. Does that seem low to you? Singleton at only 48.5?
Yeah, it definitely seems low. It's hard to trust a freshman. It's hard to trust a freshman on the road. In his first big test in the SEC, it's up to 48.5. I think you said 43. It's moving
48.5. That's my bad. 48.5.
Okay, so 48.5. Yeah, that seems low. I mean, obviously he's got 20 carries this season. Katron Allen has 14. They're not sharing the ball and they're not running the ball a ton, but they're going to in this particular football game. I would definitely pop the over on that one. Based on how he looked last week and all the hype coming around him, as possibly the best running back there since Saquon Barkley. But man, that offensive line isn't very good. So I can argue both ways. But yeah, that's a low number to me. And the other reason I have got the under in this game is because we're going to see Zach Calzada, and that's a good reason for another couple interceptions. So it's going to be a sluggish TJ Finley throw 2 picks, Calzada come off the bench, throw 2 picks, Sean Clifford, be very limited in what he could do. And let's play field position and run the football. So that Singleton over is very intriguing.
Yeah, that's the one I like in this one. I mean, the number just seems too low to me. Based on what we saw last week, I think he now runs away with that job. James Franklin has been looking for a back like Singleton now for several years. And last week he got the indication, like it was right there in front of him, just shredding Ohio. So I feel like Singleton now is going to run away with that job. That's certainly a prop to look into. Mike, heading to the next game. This is our college game day game. Troy at Appalachian State. Appalachian State coming off the big upset win last week. This line live is up to Appalachian State minus 13.5. Who do you like in Boone today?
I like App State. And the reason being, obviously this could be a big letdown game, and they beat Texas A&M. Now they're coming home to game day. I mean, there's so many distractions that you could see them come out and lay a clunker. And Troy is a solid football team, and App State is laying a large number. But I think the hype around this, I think that the pomp and circumstance of game day being there and all that other stuff is going to carry them, to a 2-touchdown victory. I mean, I don't like the line at 13.5. It's a little scary and it could move. But right now, I think App State, based on the momentum that they've got, is going to cover this game.
Yeah, and to your point about the momentum, or they've been very impressive this year, right? I mean, both against UNC, going blow for blow with UNC in that crazy what turned into a track meet, basically, especially in the fourth quarter, which is one of the most wild fourth quarters you'll ever see, where it's just score, and then they turned around from that, and then you go into Kyle Field in College Station and you upset A&M, a team that just totally overlooked you and thought that you were a joke. You upset them. Now you turn around and you're at home. Everyone's been pumping your tires for the last week. College game day is there. All the hype. This is a hard spot for Appalachian State, is it not, Mike? A tough situational spot.
It is. I mean, and that's why I can see. I could tell you're leaning Troy, because everything is here for these guys to sort of just fall flat on their face and either win a field goal game or lose outright to Troy. I just have a feeling they're first of all a more talented football team. They've got a good running game. I think Chase Bryce has kind of been there, done that in big games. So I don't think game day is going to really impact him. Just knowing him out of high school and how calm and cool and collected he is, and how he was at Clemson, and then obviously Duke and then App State. I just don't think he's going to be intimidated by it all if he was able to keep his poise at Kyle Field. So I get where you're coming from, that this is a bad spot because there's so much pressure on them. But this is a team that plays kind of loosey-goosey, and they play to their strengths. I mean, they had to outscore UNC, but they also had to sort of knuckle down and win, sort of a hard-fought football game against a really good defense, and win a low-scoring game. So I think they can do it either way. The line is what scares me. I think they're going to win the football game. 13.5 is a lot to lay, but I'm gonna go the opposite of you. I'm gonna say the momentum of game day carries them to a big victory by more than 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, and Mike, to your point about sort of the composition of this Appalachian State team, last week, right now, same time, we were on here, and I was telling you, my system is showing a ton of line value on Appalachian State against Texas A&M. But I told you I can't take it. And the reason that I felt like I couldn't take it was Appalachian State had just come off that track meet, the crazy game, the very near miss. And then they were heading into Kyle Field, and there was this weird discrepancy of the line that I couldn't explain, where it was like, what was it? A&M was by 17, or what was it? It closed somewhere around there. Whereas
it was
my
17.5, I think it closed, and it's just, somebody in Vegas knew something, is what I thought.
Or we thought, but it and maybe that was, thinking about the situational spot or whatever, but Appalachian State overcame that. And it was clear that the value that I was showing on them, that was justified, and I should have followed it. I didn't, but you have to say that in the favor of Appalachian State, that they have overcome these spots to this point. But this is another hard one. Again, you're coming off this enormous upset. You were one of the stories of all of college football this past week. Now, game day is in Boone, and so this is sort of an endear point for the program. But now you got to play this Troy team after you just played these 2 Power 5 teams. And I think Troy is sneaky a little bit better than people probably think. That most people have not seen Troy yet. In the opener, they played Mississippi. they played Mississippi pretty close. That Troy defense was flying around. They're small for sure, but they all get to the ball. They have a couple heat-seeking missiles on that defense too. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's a stingy Troy defense. We'll see how they play against this Appalachian State team, but they were able to shut down all those different running backs that Lane Kiffin has. Evans and Bentley further on down. That who's the guy that just popped up for them? Judkins or whatever, the younger kid. But Mississippi State very stacked in the backfield, and Troy was able to play with them. Last week they played an FCS team, so we just don't have as much information about them. I think that's one of the reasons that we're getting, at least I think, theoretical line value on Troy. My adjusted line on this game is Appalachian State minus 9.4. Again, live right now, the line is Appalachian State minus 13.5. So I'm showing, 4 points of line value on Troy. I'm going to take it just because of the situational spot we're in, just because I think Troy is a little bit better than the general public does. But Appalachian State has overcome tough situational spots. So we'll see if they can do it again. Mike, now we're going to move to the 6:00 Eastern kickoff slot. And Mississippi State is heading into LSU today to take on Brian Kelly's Tigers. Live right now, this line is Mississippi State minus 3. We have a total on this game of 53. What are your thoughts on this one?
You never want to be a favorite on the road in Death Valley. And Mississippi State's always good for one or two absolute clunker football games. But man, they're also the one team that nobody talks about in the SEC West that's so dangerous and has really good roster talent. I don't believe in this LSU football team. I don't believe Brian Kelly's a fit. I think when the chips are down, I think a lot of the players are going to start throwing their hands up. And this is what LSU football has become since 2019. We saw it in 2020, with the Stingleys of the world sort of, mailing it in and missing his last two seasons with questionable injuries. Elias Ricks of the world wanting to leave, Jamar Chase sitting out. This is not a team that buys in with Ed Orgeron and much less Brian Kelly. So I have Mississippi State actually winning this football game and covering the 3, which flies in the face of any logic you have about Death Valley. But I just think that this is an LSU team that's going to just start to fold the tents if anything goes wrong in this game.
And we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to wonder about, talking about the composition of Appalachian State, the composition of LSU after what we saw against Florida State. I do think that the Florida State game and the way that ended, it's been hard for the market in general, the public, to get it out of their head when thinking about LSU. And because first of all, everybody was watching that game. It was on by itself that Sunday night where it wasn't competing with NFL, wasn't competing with other college football games. Everybody saw it. And then LSU hasn't played anybody since then. They slapped around an FCS team last week. So we haven't gotten another referendum game on LSU. I think we're going to get one here, seeing how they defend Mike Leach's air raid. LSU over the past decade plus has been really successful against Mississippi State. There has been exceptions. 2 years ago, Mike Leach's first game, of course, when Costello broke the record for SEC passing yards against the defense Mike was talking about with you mentioned Stingley and Ricks.
Remember the KJ Costello NFL draft hype? Remember the hype after that? It was awesome.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, KJ Costello went from like a 7th-round pick in one day to now could be a 1st-round pick, and then he spent the next 8 weeks convincing people that he should not even be signed as a UDFA
or playing football at all.
Red.
That was a great game. That just popped into my memory that you brought that up. It's so funny.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, KJ Cuss. I don't know what he's doing right now, but I'm pretty sure he's not playing football anymore. But he definitely had an interesting ride. And before that, he was throwing all those big trees at Stanford. They had the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and those two Caden Smith, the tall tight ends. They just chuck it up deep. Good times with KJ Costello. Getting back to the point, I am on LSU in this game, getting 3 points in a night game in Baton Rouge on a Saturday. I have to take it. I feel like, in terms of talent too, to Mike's point, for sure, Mississippi State's talent is up. I'm not disrespecting Mississippi State at all, but if you look at the two rosters, the recruiting ranks, everything like that, qualitatively and objectively, LSU does have more talent than Mississippi State does. We'll have to see the quarterback play that they get. can Jaden Daniels now, Jaden Daniels plays great against the crappy defenses. It's when you have a solid defense or a good defense when his game can play way down. We know that Jaden Daniels can run. Can he get the ball to Butte this time? Can he get the ball to some of their other perimeter guys? We'll find out. That's going to be a big key of this game. But I do think we're going to get a better Daniels, at least a little bit, than through the air than we saw in the opener against FSU. He's had a little bit longer there now at this point, played in the other game as well. So I do like LSU to defend their home field and get, what's going to be considered a small upset that probably won't be an upset at all. But Mike and I are on different sides of that one. Mike, moving to the next game. Now we're at 7 p.m. Eastern kickoffs. Toledo at Ohio State. This line was higher earlier in the week. Ohio State was like minus 33. It's come down now to this morning. It's Ohio State now by 31 in Columbus. We have a total on this game of 62.5. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's just, this is sort of like take a look at the game, see where the line is, and then just wonder if the team can stay with the arguably the most talented roster in all of college football. And it's a simplistic view. Toledo is not good. Ohio State is. And I just think based on sheer talent, I don't care if Jackson Smith and Jigba's, hurt. I don't care what's happening with CJ Stroud or whether he's locking in on guys or whatever. They're still going to win this football game by 45 points. It's just, there's no way I can see them not. Now, I was the one who took them to cover the 17.5 against Notre Dame, and they were disappointing in that respect. They could be disappointing in this respect. I mean, Toledo is 2-0, but they beat Long Island and UMass. I mean, I could beat Long Island and UMass myself, just me. There's nothing to go on here. And I think Ohio State's roster talent is just, I think the backups could cover 31. So I'm on Ohio State.
I will not accept the strays being shot in Toledo's way. I think Toledo's better than you do. I think that they're a legitimate MAC contender this year. They brought back a whole bunch on both offense and defense, like Finn, their quarterback, dual threat kid, who the thing I like about Finn, he pushed it downfield while taking care of the ball. He does not throw many interceptions. The accuracy we'll have to see with him as his career goes forward, but he has always done a good job of taking care of the ball, which is something I like in a matchup against a heavily ranked opponent like this, that you're hopefully not going to see like the pick sixes or giving Ohio State a good field position. They're just happy to go the 3 and out if you can stop what they like to do. Toledo, the one guy that they lost off that team that had utility to them last year was Brian Kolbach. They've been able to replace him so far. Your old friend Penny Boone, Mike, and some different guys like that. They're figuring out by throwing that stuff together. But they have a good receiving core, interesting running back room. DeQuan Finn. They have a very experienced offensive line and a very experienced defense. The defense is one of the better ones in the G5, I think, or is going to be because of all that returning experience. And we've seen some of those guys. Now, of course, they're all gunned today in terms of overall talent, especially with. It seems like we're going to get Jackson Smith and Jigba back. It looks like, although we'll have to monitor that up to kickoff, but that's been the tea leaves have been pointing that way. And it also looks like Ohio State's going to get Julian Fleming back. Fleming missed the first 2 games. Jackson Smith and Jigba was knocked out of the opener against Notre Dame. So Ohio State been playing without him for like 7 quarters now or something like that. The offense certainly ticked down. And you'd think it's going to go, way back up with him, be what we thought it was going to be. I think it will be, long term. Short term, you got to keep your eye on it. Like for the purposes of this game, you got these 2 stud receivers who are now working back in, and then thinking about it from strategically. Ryan Day has mentioned over and over again in his comments to the media in the early season and in the offseason, we need to establish the run to win a college football championship. If we can't run in December, January. It doesn't matter. It's all going to be for naught. So they want to establish the run early in the season beyond even what their game scripts are going to be in some of these Big Ten games. They're willing to sort of invest in that, and do that, try to figure out the offensive line stuff. So I think you're going to see more running out of them. Not vanilla, but more vanilla than you usually see. And speaking of vanilla, Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator there, Notre Dame the defense has held down both opponents they played, Notre Dame in the opener. Buckner wasn't playing well. We talked about that before, but Ohio State took away whatever they wanted to do. And then the last game they played Arkansas State, who, they shut them down too. But Jim Knowles said in both those games, they played a vanilla, straightforward defense. He was not showing those teams the wrinkles that he has. Weren't playing up to their total potential because he doesn't want to put it on film for when they get into the Big Ten play. He ain't going to do that here against Toledo either. It's going to be another very straightforward thing. So I don't think Ohio State's going to throw the kitchen sink into this one. I think they're going to be happy to have the clock running, play their vanilla defense. I think Toledo's a little bit better than people think. My line on this game is Ohio State minus 24.5. It's 31 live, so I'm showing the value on Toledo. I like Toledo. I got to disagree with you on that one.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know if the defense can keep Ohio State out of the end zone. I mean, their best defensive player is a guy who couldn't crack the lineup consistently at Ohio State. So essentially, if you think about that, there's probably about 22 guys on the Ohio State defense better than Dallas Gant. That worries me a little bit.
Joe Burrow couldn't crack the lineup there either, Mike.
Well, that's true. Well, that was just dumb. Well, no, it wasn't dumb. Dwayne Haskins was good. It's a good point. It's a good point.
I mean, I'm not saying that Dallas Gant is Joe Burrow, but there are circumstances where guys get just caught on the wrong side of numbers at a school like that.
Yeah, well, why don't you just name the best quarterback transfer in the history of college football to make your point? That's pretty easy to do. I mean, listen, the
Dallas Gant's family's loving this. And
I'm telling you that the linebacker core at Ohio State was not very good in 2019 and 2020, and he played and he didn't play well, and he had to transfer out, and now he's at Toledo, and maybe his insight into this offense will help because he was practicing against them all the time. But when your best player is arguably the 13th or 14th or 15th best player on the opposing defense, and they're known for offense, I just think it's going to be a rout. I mean, a rout. We know it's going to be a rout. Just is it going to be a 31-point rout? And
exactly.
You don't think it will be, and I think it will be.
So we disagree on that one. Moving to another game, 7 p.m. kickoff, same as the last one we just talked about. This one between two teams in the Power Five. We're going to get some more information about these two teams today. Texas Tech traveling to North Carolina State. We got a live line this morning of North Carolina State by 10. It's right on that 10 number. The total of this game is 55.5. Mike, what are your thoughts on this one?
I love Texas Tech in this. You're like, I mean, listen, I'm a Devin Leary guy. I like Devin Leary. I think it's one of those situations where if the line were lower, maybe I would be on NC State. I think this is going to be a close game. I think this is going to be a sort of one possession football game. Joey McGuire is a very underrated coach. I mean, he's only coached a couple times, but I like what he did at Baylor. Obviously, he did a great job at the high school level. Dave Doran's a very good coach. I think these are two smart guys, but I think this is going to be a close game, and I think this is going to be an NC State sort of field goal win. But there's a chance they could lose this game. So when I see a 10-point line and a chance that Texas Tech could win this game outright, I kind of have to lean towards taking that 10 points and crossing my fingers and saying, let's look for a close game.
I'm not betting the side on this one because I'm just not showing a lot of value with the numbers. But to Mike's point, if I had to, I think I probably would be on Texas Tech for some of those same reasons. They played sort of analogous schedules in that they both played an FCS team, and then they both barely got by a G5 team. With Tech, it was Houston, of course, in that one. And then with NC State, you got to go back to the opener when they played East Carolina. Maybe should have lost that one. They escaped them. But East Carolina, like in the past, these past couple of years, Houston's been way better than East Carolina. This year, though, those two teams are probably pretty close. So in terms of just the overall resume through two games, these two teams' resumes are very close. They don't play the same way. Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, like you were mentioning, they're going back to the air raid, and then on the other side with NC State, they want to play a little bit more slow and methodical, and then try to help out the defense a little bit more while letting Devin Leary throw the ball. But on the side, my adjusted line in this game is North Carolina State by 10.3. It's right in line with the 10 number. With the over-under, though, I do lean over in this game. The line, the total is 55.5. My system's total on this game is 66. we've already seen Texas Tech in the shootout with Houston. I think that's what they're going to be against, more solid teams when they're not playing an FCS team or whatever. I think it's going to lead or nod back towards the previous Texas Tech team, maybe before the Wells era, but like when they would get into some of these firefights, in games with the closer talent levels. North Carolina State, if they had their druthers, they would, of course, they'd hold down Texas Tech, and then they try to run the clock a little bit more. I don't think they're going to have the luxury here. The Texas Tech offense, even without Tyler Shuck, Donovan Smith, he played great at the end of last year after Shuck got hurt. By the end of the season, he was the bowl game MVP and everything like that. He can do a couple different things. He has arm strength. He's a big kid. He can move around. He can steal some yards as a runner, everything like that. And Texas Tech has skill talent. So they can do a whole bunch of different things. Even though I'm not going to touch the side, because I do think it is pretty close, even though I would probably lean Texas Tech, I do like the over because I think that North Carolina State is going to have to answer some of those early scores that Texas Tech can get. I like Tech's offense even without Shuck, so I'm going to go over in that one.
I like the plus 10 to parlay with the over too. I mean, Texas Tech 4-0 in their last 4 games in September, over 6-2 in their last 8 road games. Versus a winning team. Everything reeks of the over. I went with the line because I like the 10 and I think Texas Tech could win this one, but I would parlay the 10 with the over and make yourself some good money.
For sure. Moving to the now we're at 7:30 Eastern kickoff. This one is fascinating. The line's been doing different stuff, and there's wildly different opinions about this game out in the industry. Michigan State traveling to Washington. Both these teams haven't played anybody yet, so we're going to get a lot of information in this one. The market, interestingly, has set Washington as a 3.5-point favorite. Total on this game, 56.5. Mike, what do you think about this one?
This is very intriguing because, Michigan State is a team that was in the playoff hunt last season. And Washington's been a bit of a nightmare over the last couple seasons. Michigan State can run the football. They had a 2-headed monster, both of them transfers. I don't trust Michael Penix Jr. being back, even though he's looked good. But it's at Washington. That's a tough place to play. I've got Michigan State. I hate the line, but I'm still going to lay the field goal. And I'm going to take Michigan State to win this one on the road. I'm not lay the field. Take the 3. Now it's up to 3.5. So if you're giving me 3.5 for the better football team, and Washington's sort of getting that because they're the home team, I'll take Michigan State. I think their roster is just better.
Yeah, I'm going with Michigan State in this one too. I want to be more confident than I am, or I should say as confident as my numbers are. My numbers have Michigan State favored by 4.2 points. And again, the live line is 3.5 the other way for Washington. So I'm showing over a touchdown of line value theoretically on Michigan State. But this is one of those games, Mike, like that we've talked about in recent weeks where it's like, it's hard to explain the line. It seems really fishy. Because I mean, like, what Vegas is telling you by setting Washington as 3.5 point favorite, it's these two teams are dead equal in a vacuum, and you give Washington the 3 to 3.5 points for home field advantage. But based on we haven't seen these teams play anyone. They've both blown out 2 bad teams, but Michigan State was way better last year. Washington would have had to take several steps forward, multiple steps forward, and levels up to be on the same plane as Michigan State. Even though Michigan State lost Walker, they've been running the ball fine so far. Defense looks solid. They got some receivers. So, but it's just weird with where the line is. I have problems with it for that, where it's one of those games where maybe you start to talk yourself out of it for that reason. But I lean heavily Michigan State. I'll have a Michigan State ticket. Maybe it wouldn't be as much as general where I'm showing a discrepancy like this, just because it's hard for me to explain why Washington is favored by as much as they are.
Yeah, this is a, somebody knows something type of thing. I mean, this is a 4-8 football team last year that's beaten nobody, that really only had a few roster changes when it comes to transfers. Obviously Penix coming in as quarterback, and a Michigan State team that has Broussard and Berger at running back, and Peyton Thorne's efficient at quarterback, Jalen Reed. It's just a much more talented football team, and you're wondering why they're getting points on the road. So, maybe they're averse to rain. Maybe it's going to rain. Maybe I don't. There's something weird here. But I'm taking that 3.5 as a gift, and I'm not overthinking it. Michigan State is the much better football team, and they should win this game by 10. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And people betting on Michigan State probably just want to bet the money line instead. I feel like if Michigan State covers, it's because they won the game all right, right? Whereas with on the Washington side, like I feel like if they win, it's because they've taken more steps forward than we even think right now, right? That the offense had become legitimate in that one-off season. So like if they win, I think it's going to be by more than 4, I guess. Whereas if Michigan State covers, like I said, I think they're winning outright. So if you like Michigan State, maybe think about the money line. So both Mike and I are on, we agree on that one. We're on Michigan State. Moving to the next one. This game is in Austin. We returned to Austin after last week. It was so interesting in the early kick. This one later on, 8 p.m. Eastern kick. UTSA heading to Austin in what could be a trap spot for the Longhorns. I don't know. Mike, what are your thoughts on this one with Texas right now favored by 12.5 live?
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to predict a letdown after a loss, but Alabama was supposed to beat Texas by 30 points according to everybody, and Texas hung in there and arguably should have won the football game based on a few officiating calls, and it's a big moment for them. So you could do Texas's back. They play the number 1 team in the country really close. It should have won the game. And then every time that occurs, you take the other team. And that's why I'm taking, Frank Harris and UTSA. And they're not more talented. They haven't looked as good as I hoped. I mean, the back and forth with Houston was good. And the win over Army is a solid victory, but they're 1-1. But I think they're going to give him trouble. Quinn Ewers changes this team. Hudson Card, to me, is a guy who's still going to make a couple mistakes. They're not utilizing Bijan Robinson effectively, nor are they blocking for him effectively. And I think the Texas defense played as good a game as they could possibly play. And I think that, they got this beat my chest because we, sort of shut down Bryce Young to an extent. And then they're going to see, Frank Harris come in here and he's going to run all over them. Now, they're not going to win. I think Texas should win this football game. But if somebody told me, hey, listen, I'm going to take the UTSA money line, let me see what it's at. I wouldn't argue against them because this is the type of game that Texas could just fall flat on their face. Plus 360, and the line's up to 12.5. I think UTSA is the safe bet here, and I know you're going to disagree.
I do, but not enough to really argue with it that hard. This is a game I'm not going to bet. I do lean Texas. Even though it sets up as a potential letdown spot, like you said, it was a loss, but very, very good effort, and then a near miss. Obviously against a Goliath of an opponent. I like what you said about it was well put about going from Ewers, who is now injured because of that game, to now going to Hudson Card. You lose the arm talent, especially now. You can't stretch the field. Card's a little bit better scrambler, but the arm talent is falling way off the shelf. But I do think we're going to get a decent effort out of Texas here. That's the number one thing. I think this is the Bijan game where he goes ballistic. We'll see about Card through the air, but he can steal yards on the ground at least, and hopefully not do the stupid turnovers as well. UTSA, I've not been as impressed with them, this season so far, because the running game appears to be down after they lost Sincere McCormick. They have been doing interesting things through the air, but Texas was able to take down that high-flying Alabama passing offense last week. So Texas appears to have their large swaths of their defense figured out. The pass defense, the early returns are really, really good. So I do lean Texas. Mike likes UTSA. Mike, moving into the next hour now, 9 p.m. Eastern, huge game. Miami traveling to Kyle Field, Texas A&M favored by 6 in this one. Who do you like in this one?
This is the biggest game of the weekend, I think. And I think, Miami getting those points, I would take it on the road. I think Texas Tech is going to rebound. I think they're going to win the football game, but I don't think they're going to cover. Jimbo's under an extreme amount of pressure. This team could come out and play a little tight after the App State. If they do falter in the first couple quarters, there could be a lot of people looking at each other and pointing at each other. And again, this is a different world we live in. You're making more money than me. You better start playing better. You're making more money than me. You better start playing. There's a lot of finger pointing, and I don't think this team has bought into Jimbo, and I don't think he's done a great job at Texas A&M of developing football players. So I think they win this one, but I think it's a field goal game. I would take the Miami points. It's plus 6.5 live on DraftKings right now. And I would also, wouldn't be averse to the money line because this is kind of a pick'em game to me. You're getting 6.5 because you think Texas A&M's angry and you think the home field advantage is worth that 6.5.
1,000%. Like, yeah, I'm definitely on Miami. I'm even harder on them, I think, that maybe than Mike is, but we definitely agree on this. I agree with Mike that the line should be around pick'em. My numbers on this game right now, it's Miami by 1.7. So I'm actually showing them as the favorite, but again, right around pick'em. But it's weird that A&M is favored by as much as they are, right? They're coming off the upset loss. It seems like the market hasn't downgraded them at all, which is weird just in a vacuum. Like, usually when you're getting sort of the inflated line, it's because you're coming off of a blowout or a super impressive performance and not the dud that A&M did. So you have that where it's weird in terms of that, but also just in terms of personnel. Like, Mike was sort of starting to hit on it with the Jimbo player development stuff. But, they don't have quarterback play. Number one, they pulled the plug on Haynes King. They're going with Max Johnson. But Max Johnson, he's this statuesque pocket passing quarterback that Brian Kelly didn't care when he left LSU. It wasn't like he was trying to stop Max Johnson from moving out of Baton Rouge. And then Max Johnson lost the starting competition to Haynes King, who was stunk in the first 2 weeks. You would think that Max Johnson can give them more than what they got from Haynes King, but we'll see on that one. I don't believe in him. The running back room, they don't have the bell cow anymore. You have Odchain, who's more of the situational usage guy and can give you explosive plays, but his game is played down a little bit without having that bell cow next to him. So they don't have the running game that they've had in the past, few years. Their receiving talent, the tight end room talent, that's down as well. And then the other problem, so that's on the offensive side. On the defensive side of the ball, A&M's coverage has been about as bad as any Power 5 team. Like, they played Appalachian State in an FCS team or whatever, and their coverage grade is awful. Like PFF, their coverage grade is like 124th. They are seeding separation, play in and play out. And that was against those teams to chase Bryce and his merry band of marauders. Now you turn around, you have to play Miami and Tyler Van Dyke, who's a legitimate first-round NFL prospect, has a big league arm, and Miami has a whole bunch at the skill talent as well. Now, Xavier Restrepo is out, the Miami receiver. That does need to be mentioned, but they got plenty of talent there and plenty of speed on the outside for Van Dyke. And the other thing, Miami, past couple of years, they've been trying to find a running back. They finally found one, and it came in the weirdest way possible, where Henry Parrish leaves Mississippi because the portal king Lane Kiffin is out signing Zach Evans and Ulysses Bentley and all this stuff, bringing in all these guys. So Parrish leaves. He goes to Miami. Miami might have found a star. Henry Parrish has been as impressive as any other running back these first couple of weeks. This is his big opportunity on a big stage to prove it against this A&M defense. And the A&M run defense is still good. So, that's going to be really interesting to watch those two things. I'm not sure how that matchup plays out, but I know that Tyler Van Dyke is going to rip up this A&M secondary. I don't know what his over-under passing yards is. I'll have to look at that right when we get off. But I'm probably going to be on the Van Dyke over, just because they're going to beat A&M secondary. They just are.
Yeah. One of the props I took was actually when I wrote my prop article earlier was Tyler Van Dyke over 1.5 passing TDs.
Oh, love it.
Which flies in the face of a lot of things. Xavier Restrepo is out, as you mentioned. They don't have a deep wide receiver room, but A&M's been just so lethargic when it comes to pass defense. And so two things can happen. Let's say A&M comes out and gets their offense together with Max Johnson and they go up. Then that means Van Dyke's going to throw the ball more. Or Henry Parrish, as you mentioned, is one of their leading receivers as well out of the backfield. If that defense stuffs him, they're going to get him the ball in ways in space. So I just think, Van Dyke over 1.5 passing TDs at Texas A&M. It's a plus 140. That's the reason I took it. If it was minus 110, I'd be like, nah. But if you're going to give me, a plus 140 on that, then I'm going to take Van Dyke to put up big numbers. The passing numbers, a little iffy, but the touchdowns to me with the plus 140, it was a value.
I like that. Yeah, we're on the same side with this. I both on Miami. We both like over props for Van Dyke for sure. I didn't realize we're running out of time so quickly.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. So let's talk about this one quick. Fresno State at USC, the last game that Mike and I are going to talk about this afternoon or this morning. USC is favored in this one by 13.5 live. We have a total of 72.5. That thing's been taken way up. This is a 10:30 Eastern kick. So we got a late one potentially for people to bet on. Mike, who do you like in this game?
Yeah, I believe in USC, and I believed in Florida after their victory over Utah, and I shouldn't have, because they, you finally got Anthony Richardson on film, and Mark Stoops showed what a great coach he is, and he was able to handle him. I don't think there's an ability for Fresno State to handle Caleb Williams. It's -6 right now. It's going to move a lot. Not -6. I'm sorry. It's actually shut down right now. So
13.5, I think, is what it is live.
Yeah, the line's going to move a lot more as we move forward into the evening. I just believe USC can win this football game and in a rout. In the past, a game like this, if Fresno State, usually a pretty good offensive team, would be able to hang with them. But I think Caleb Williams is the X factor. I also have Dye going over, I think it's 93.5 yards. He hasn't done that yet. I think they're going to really beat him with their feet, believe it or not. Williams running the ball, Dye running the ball against the Fresno State defense that I don't think is going to be able to hang with them.
Yeah, I'm sort of live right now. That line is down to USC 10.5. So excuse me, first off, but it appears that money this morning is coming in on Fresno State. That thing's like been moving even since we've been on.
Now. It moves every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Now. So.
And with that game being a late kick, it's going to be really interesting to watch the line movement, because it seems like the sharp bettors are moving in on this one now, and we have all day, for money to keep flying in on that one. But the line is down. I do lean Fresno State in this one. We haven't seen USC. We saw them against Rice last week. They played Stanford, and they did cover and they look solid. Stanford's talent, Mike, as you know, has been weighed down in recent years. It looks like it's another year where they're not going to be very good. This Fresno State team, though, they can do stuff, specifically the passing offense, and I think that's going to provide some problems for USC. So I would lean Fresno in that one.
Yeah, you love Jake Haener. I'm not a big Haener guy, but Haener is a good quarterback, and they could stay in here. I'm buying into USC. I think they've got a swagger about them.
For sure. Yeah. We'll see if they have the bodies in the secondary and the depth in the secondary to be able to contend with the Fresno State receivers. Before Fresno State had good receivers, then they had a real find in the transfer portal, and that Nico Remigio kid. They've been peppering him with targets over the first 2 games. I think there's 8 catches in the first 2 games, 100 yards in both of them. So Fresno State's passing offense looks even a little bit better because they got even more weapons this year. So I'm on Fresno. I lean Fresno. Mike is on USC. Mike, we've run out of time, but really quickly, I wanted to hit your props. If there was any that we didn't hit while we were going through, which other props do you like for the people today?
I think Sean Clifford under 233.5 passing yards. It's a -115, but I don't see him putting up anything more than that.
Especially with Singleton emerging, Mike. That's another note for that.
And a conservative game plan on the road, too. I don't think he's going to let Sean Clifford throw the ball a whole lot. Braylon Allen over 133.5 rushing yards versus New Mexico State. Mo Ibrahim came just under that number. New Mexico State, in their blowout win over New Mexico State. New Mexico State's not good. Ibrahim was out in the third quarter. They need a big victory. They need to get the big guy on track. He's only averaged 17 carries over the first 2 games. He's going to get 25. He's going to get over 133.5. And then the other one is take Anthony Richardson to rush for a touchdown. I've got him over 0.5 rushing touchdowns. South Florida is bad. Billy Napier is slapping himself on the wrist for all week long for not running this guy more. Look for an RPO, and he's going to keep it, and he'll have 1 scamper for a touchdown.
Well, on that note, that's all we got for you today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of College Football Game Day Live, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. And one last time, because this offer is going to end in 2 days, want to mention it one more time on the way out. enter promo code CFB Pros at sign up. If you put in $5 or more into DraftKings, you get $200 in free bets. The offer ends on September 19th, which I think is on Monday. So this is your last college football Saturday to get to take advantage of that offer. So definitely go out and do that. For my co-host, Mike Farrell, I am Thor Nystrom. Enjoy your college football Saturday and good luck with your bets.